Quirky designs, bold experiments, and plenty of missteps. These vintage pickups from the 60s were anything but ordinary, from space-age concepts to rugged workhorses. Let's take a ride through automotive history's most curious creations. 1961 Chevrolet Corvair Rampside. So, the Chevrolet Corvair Rampside wasn't just a pickup, it was an experiment in weirdness. Its rear-mounted, air-cooled engine was an engineering gamble, and while innovative in concept, it left buyers scratching their heads. The engine placement made the front end lighter, which meant handling was, let's call it, interesting. Turning corners felt like a trust exercise with gravity. It was the only pickup in Chevrolet's lineup that wasn't designed for maximum hauling power, but instead focused on versatility. The signature feature, a fold-down ramp on the passenger side of the bed, was handy for loading small vehicles or equipment. However, the limited weight capacity of the rear engine axle meant you couldn't haul anything too heavy without compromising stability. A full load made the truck squat like it was perpetually bracing for impact. The Corvair's Rampside cargo space was smaller than most trucks of the era, and its unique design made it more of a curiosity than a practical workhorse. One surprising fact, the Rampside was marketed as a space-age solution to hauling problems. Ads depicted it as futuristic, even though it looked like something scavenged from a UFO scrapyard. Unfortunately, its sales trajectory was closer to a crash landing, and Chevrolet abandoned the concept after only 3 years. Its quirky design failed to resonate with mainstream buyers, and the Corvair brand itself struggled to shake off the negative reputation built by the car's handling issues, famously critiqued in Ralph Nader's book Unsafe at Any Speed. 1960 Dodge D100 Sweptline. Picture this, the Dodge D100 Sweptline was meant to usher in a new era of stylish utility, but instead, it looked like a block of cheese on wheels. Its oversized front grille gave it a face only a mother could love, or maybe not, since it resembled a steel lattice with all the charm of a barbecue grill. Despite its boxy design, the Sweptline featured a modern, independent front suspension, a leap ahead of the leaf spring suspension many trucks still used. However, it was the design flaws that took center stage. Mechanically, it offered solid performance for the time, including an innovative slant-six engine that was reliable and easy to maintain. But the design decisions overshadowed its practicality. For instance, the tailgate didn't close smoothly, and the squared-off lines made it feel dated even in its debut year. Moreover, the small cab left little room for comfort, and visibility was limited by the truck's stubby nose and large pillars. One fascinating detail, the Sweptline was one of the first trucks to offer two-tone paint jobs as a factory option. Unfortunately, the bold colors just made it look more like a clown car at a distance. Despite its flaws, it was popular among farmers because it was cheap, rugged, and easy to repair, a classic example of form following function and failing. The Sweptline lived on in the 1960s with a reputation for being dependable, even though it was often overshadowed by better-looking rivals. 1964 Studebaker Champ. Alright, the Studebaker Champ is a study in automotive desperation. By the 1960s, Studebaker was on its last legs, and the Champ was its last attempt to claw into the lucrative pickup market. Its front borrowed heavily from the Studebaker Lark sedan, which is a kind way of saying they simply recycled car parts to save money. The result? A truck that looked like it had an identity crisis, more sedan than rugged workhorse. While its slide-in tailgate was a cool innovation, the bed itself was small and shallow compared to competitors. It also offered fewer drivetrain options, limiting its appeal to serious truck buyers. The Champ was underpowered, particularly in its lower trims, and it struggled to compete with the growing muscle in Ford and GM's lineup. To make matters worse, the Champ's poor sales were a symptom of the larger issues facing Studebaker, which was in the process of winding down production and selling off assets. One quirky fact, Studebaker offered the Champ with a Perkins diesel engine, one of the first trucks in the US to do so. It was efficient but noisy and slow, adding another layer of awkwardness to an already bizarre vehicle. While the diesel option had appeal for certain markets, it was ultimately too niche to save the struggling brand. 1962 Ford Econoline Pickup. Ever wondered if the Econoline Pickup's cab-over design was ahead of its time, or perhaps way behind it, depending on your perspective? With the driver sitting directly over the front axle, every bump in the road felt like a direct punch to the spine. Ford's marketing team emphasized the compactness of the truck, but that came at the cost of visual appeal. The tall, boxy shape, while practical for urban use, didn't appeal to the average truck buyer looking for something more rugged and versatile. Its engine was tucked between the seats, leading to a hot and noisy ride that made long drives a test of endurance. Practical? Maybe. Comfortable? Not even close. And while it boasted decent payload capacity for its size, it struggled to compete with full-size pickups when it came to versatility. Its low profile made it ideal for city delivery routes, but it lacked the towing power and payload capacity of its larger competitors. Fun fact, the Econoline pickup was a favorite among small business owners, especially florists and bakers, who didn't care about style as long as the truck delivered. Ironically, its goofy appearance probably helped it stand out in city traffic, a rolling billboard if you will. In fact, the Econoline's design would go on to inspire later vans and delivery trucks, though its pickup version would never capture mainstream success. 1967 Jeep Gladiator. Imagine the Gladiator that had a lot of potential. It was a Jeep after all, but its aesthetics let it down. Its grille, a half-hearted interpretation of Jeep's iconic 7-slot design, looked like someone gave up halfway through. The body panels were flat and uninspired, and the overall stance made it seem more like a rugged station wagon than a proper truck. With its straight edges and clunky proportions, the Gladiator's design was a far cry from the sleek lines that were becoming popular in the late 60s. Mechanically, the Gladiator was ahead of its time. Its 4-wheel drive system was excellent, and the optional Tornado OHC 6-cylinder engine was an engineering marvel for its era, offering better performance and fuel efficiency than many competitors. But all the capability in the world couldn't distract from its underwhelming design. The Gladiator struggled to appeal to civilian buyers when more stylish alternatives were emerging from companies like Ford and Chevy. Interesting tidbit, the Gladiator was available in a military version, the M715, which saw service in the Vietnam War. In that context, its no-frills design made sense. But for civilian buyers, it was hard to justify its hefty price tag when prettier trucks were available. Despite its lackluster appearance, the Gladiator's off-road prowess would ensure it maintained a cult following among Jeep enthusiasts for years to come. 1961 International Harvester Travelette. While it was innovative as one of the first crew cab pickups, the Travelette's design screamed agriculture. It looked like a tractor that wandered into a truck factory and decided to stay. The proportions were awkward, with a cab so big it dwarfed the bed, making it almost useless for larger loads. The Travelette's huge cab was designed to carry more people, but in doing so, it compromised the vehicle's overall utility, with a bed that was shorter than most of its contemporaries. It was a solution in search of a problem. Powering the Travelette were engines that ranged from gutless to just adequate. It handled like a tank, which was great for durability, but terrible for comfort. Its massive size made parking a nightmare, and its styling wasn't winning over suburban buyers. Despite offering decent towing capacity and off-road capabilities, its strange proportions made it unappealing to anyone who didn't need to haul people and equipment in equal measure. Fun fact, International Harvester marketed the Travelette as a family truck, but families apparently disagreed. Most buyers were ranchers or farmers who valued utility over appearances. Unfortunately, the Travelette's cumbersome design and underwhelming engine options meant that it never gained widespread popularity, and it faded into obscurity soon after its debut. 1963 Chevrolet CK Fleetside. The 1963 Chevrolet CK Fleetside was one of Chevrolet's first serious attempts to design a modern pickup with a little style. Unfortunately, it fell victim to a strange mix of innovation and awkwardness. The truck's flared fenders looked like they belonged on a car from the 50s, and the grille resembled a giant metal mouth full of missing teeth. It was an uncomfortable fusion of 50s roundness and the sharp, angular trends of the early 60s, which made it appear caught between eras. The mechanical features of the CK Fleetwood were solid for the time, with independent front suspension improving its ride quality significantly compared to other pickups. The 6-cylinder engine was efficient, but lacked the power that would have justified the bold grille design. With a price starting around $2,200, it was accessible for many working-class buyers, and its 4-wheel drive option was a game-changer for rural drivers who needed more than just a city hauler. Despite its strange looks, the CK series was a success in terms of sales, and Chevrolet would go on to dominate the pickup market in the 1960s and beyond. But when it comes to the Fleetside's design, let's just say it wasn't exactly love at first sight. Interestingly, this is one of the first trucks to be marketed as a luxury pickup, a concept that would become more common in the following decades. 1960 Ford Ranchero. The Ford Ranchero is a vehicle that's simultaneously beloved and, well, questionable. While the Ranchero went on to become a classic for its unique blend of car and truck features, the 1960 model raised more eyebrows than it won hearts. It had a car's sleekness at the front, with the rear end awkwardly sliced off to reveal a flatbed. The Ranchero looked like it was trying to figure out if it wanted to be a workhorse or a sporty coupe. The Ranchero's construction was based on the Ford Falcon, meaning it was small and light. Powered by a weak 6-cylinder engine, the performance was underwhelming at best, even though Ford touted it as the perfect truck for people who don't need a full-size vehicle. The bed was just too small for serious hauling, and with the rear wheel well intruding into the cargo space, you couldn't fit long items without them sticking out awkwardly. It felt like Ford was trying to sell a truck for people who didn't need a truck, a confusing pitch to say the least. But here's the surprising part. The Ranchero actually sold well, with over 21,000 units sold in its first year. This proved that while its design was offbeat, the public was curious about a vehicle that combined the utility of a truck with the ease of a car. It's also interesting to note that the Ranchero became a favorite of small business owners, who used it for deliveries, just without any of the glitz and glamour that usually comes with iconic vehicles. 1965 GMC Handi-Bus Pickup. If you've ever seen a boxy van with a pickup bed awkwardly grafted onto its rear, you've probably encountered the 1965 GMC Handi-Bus Pickup. While its design was an attempt to maximize cargo space in a compact package, the result was a weird, tall, and ungainly vehicle that could be best described as a van with commitment issues. It looked like GMC was trying to create a mini delivery vehicle, but ended up with something that looked like a cheap toy someone decided to make functional. This forward-control design meant the driver sat above the front wheels, a configuration that felt more cramped than practical. The bed was relatively small, and the high profile made it prone to tipping when fully loaded, giving the Handi-Bus Pickup a jarring, uncomfortable driving experience. The truck's short wheelbase and narrow stance made for a bumpy ride on anything but perfectly paved roads. Despite its looks and ride quality, GMC marketed it as the perfect urban delivery vehicle. Its small size meant it could navigate through city streets easily, but even that couldn't save it from its reputation as a truck designed by someone who hated beauty. Still, it found a niche market among small business owners. The truck's low production numbers, less than 30,000, meant it didn't last long, and the Handi-Bus Pickup was phased out in 1966. Fun fact, it was one of the first vehicles to feature sliding side doors, which became a staple of minivans in later decades. 1969 Chevrolet El Camino. So, Chevrolet's 1969 El Camino base model took a turn for the better in terms of performance, but not necessarily in terms of looks. The base model of the El Camino was a strange hybrid, as it tried to mix the flair of a muscle car with the practicality of a truck. The result was an awkward mismatch that looked like someone tried to throw a pickup bed on a car that wasn't made for it. The front end borrowed heavily from the Chevelle sedan, making it look sleek, but the bed was an uninspired afterthought. Under the hood, the base model featured a lackluster 140 horsepower straight-six engine, which hardly matched the swagger of the muscle car-inspired design. The bed, while decent in size, wasn't quite big enough to make up for the confused image the vehicle portrayed. This wasn't a serious hauler, but it wasn't a muscle car either, leaving the El Camino stuck in no man's land. Despite these design flaws, the El Camino did see success, particularly among buyers looking for a vehicle with both utility and style, but the base model never quite found the sweet spot. When equipped with the optional V8 engine, however, the El Camino became much more compelling. The 1969 El Camino SS Super Sport was an entirely different beast, capable of 350 horsepower and much more capable of backing up the muscle car aesthetic. Fun fact, the 1969 El Camino was used as a vehicle for various law enforcement agencies, thanks to its versatile utility. However, the base model was just as often the butt of jokes in the truck world, seen more as an experimental concept than a serious contender in the market.